We wanted to talk a little bit about the house that they put together in Ontario on the property Dad and Mother had bought previously. Well, when they moved up there, there was no house, and so they had to clear the land from sagebrush, and there was no place to cook. So Joy had to cook out in the open using sagebrush for the fuel, and then sometimes the breeze would come up and blow the lids off the kettles that Joy was cooking on this campfire. And so Althea was about 3 years old that time, and when the lids would go flying off from the breeze, Althea would say, "I get some, Joy, I get some." She'd go running and get the lids to bring back. And then when they finally got the house up, they just put it up in sections, and it went up very quickly. But there was still space in between the boards because they didn't have any of that
Insulation.
paper. Well, they never had insulation, but they just put that paper on the outside, and it kept the breeze out until they got more into building it. But just there, when the wind would come up with a dust storm, we had several dust storms up there. Of course, the land was all dug up, and the crack between the boards that were
Just go through it.
yes, and the wind and the dust would go through, and so things were very hard at that time, but they did it.
And just so that I understand completely, when they moved to Ontario, the family besides you and Tommy, they moved to nothing. That wasn't there. That house.
No, there was no house.
There's
It was
nothing.
all sagebrush.
So where did they sleep? Where did they?
Well, I guess probably they had sleeping bags, or I don't know. Maybe they found a shelter. I don't know. I wasn't there, so I don't
Yeah.
know.
Wow.
But
That's
things were tough,
Yeah, things were tough.
and no wonder Dad would get ulcers.
Yeah. And when you would sleep, there was an upstairs. And
Where are you?
I'm
On this
sorry. Yeah. Was there an upstairs?
There was an upstairs, yes. And I think Uncle Jim and Aunt Bertha, when they first moved up there, because Jim and Bertha didn't have a home either, and so I think they stayed upstairs. And then I know things were so tough, and they couldn't work because they hadn't lived there long enough. And I know I can remember somebody in the family that was there. I was not there yet. They say they had to count the hamburger patties. Each one had about so much, because until they lived there 6 months, they couldn't draw wages.
Because they were not residents of the
Yes,
state.
not residents of the state then. And anyway, so then Dad, I think I told earlier that Dad and Fred would break other people's horses with some of their own to break them to be work horses. I don't think there was any riding horses, but they would break other people's horses to work.
Oh.
They weren't tame yet, and they weren't broke to work. And so that's what Dad and Fred did, was work other people's horses and get paid in hay or whatever they did. I don't
For
remember.
your horses.
Yes, with our horses, so they could feed the horses and probably eke a little out for the family too. So that was back in the days before you were born.
Wow.
So,
We're spoiled.
well, I don't know. It's just the way the times were at those days, and what happened to Dad and the family in those days. You just make it through. You don't give up. If at first you don't succeed, just try again. So that was Dad, and his wonderful person that he was kept his family together, where Grandma Douglas wanted to separate us, put us all different places. And my dad says, our family's staying together, and together they stayed. Did you want to go to the next page?
Yes, please.
Oh, you are. All right, this first page, number 250, it just is self-explanatory there. I wasn't there, and so I don't know what it's all about. It's just a picture I had. I thought that about that time I'd put it in. And then the one opposite it was the Bert and Fred and Joy and Althea and I, the five of us together. And this was taken at Bert's Ranch there by the Butte in Ontario. At Bert's Ranch there in Ontario, the little one that he had close to Dad's there. And then this one is self-explanatory. I don't know what it is. I wrote all that I knew about that picture.
Of your dad? While he
Yes,
was
I think
in
that was
ICS?
Grandpa Hawkins' art when he was selling ICS, that's International Correspondence Course, and he was doing that in Astoria, I think was where he was working from.
Does Doug know that?
What?
Because didn't Doug grow up in Astoria?
Dad?
Doug, no, Colleen's husband, Doug, did
Oh,
he
he
grow up in
was
Astoria?
Svensson, which
Oh, okay.
is this way from the coast.
Okay.
Then this next picture, I think we've seen more of that before, and Fred is building roads in Ravendale, I think that's, and he just had a team there. But before he could handle a lot of horses. I know when he was going to high school at the same time Bert was, they, at the fairgrounds in our FFA, they were trying to teach kids how to drive more than 2 horses. And I don't know, I think there were 6 horses and that each boy had to drive. And so there were all these reins that are
For each horse?
for each horse, I think. Anyway, so Fred had done that all his life. And so the judge was there. It was in the arena there at the fairgrounds. So Fred was sitting and waiting for it to stop. He had a whole fistful of reins, and these other kids were getting the reins in between each finger the way they should. And Fred, he just had the whole hand. And when it came time, he just knew his fingers knew how to do that. And Fred got first prize because he was just very nonchalant about it.
Because he'd been doing it since he was a little boy.
Yes, since he was about 8 or, well, over than 9, I think, for that many horses. But he'd been doing it all his life, so that was, and he won that. And then I've told about other things that he won the FFA in Ontario. He won the American Farmers Award. I've told that. So this next page is, excuse me, I have to move it back. Oh, this one, number 254. Those of us that were, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of us. Tommy wasn't there. Went down to Uncle Bill Douglas's funeral, and so we were there standing outside Aunt Betty's home, I think it was, where we were gathered together there for the funeral.
And was that the same? Was Uncle Bill buried in the same plot as Grandpa?
Yes, in the Mount Shasta Cemetery, and Mother and Tommy were also buried there. And then Alta was buried, Grandpa and Grandma Hawkins were buried in Ontario Cemetery, and so was Alta.
Oh,
Alta
good.
was born there too, beside Grandpa and Grandma.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next picture, 255, across from us, it's kind of a generation picture. There was, I have to turn
Oh, that's
this.
okay.
This was Joy and her son Doug. Well, first it was Dad, and then Dad was the first generation. Joy was the second, and Doug was the third. And Doug Jr. Was the 4th generation.
Wow.
And so that was the generation. Of course, Doug Jr. was the first of the 4th generation. That was our Dad's first grandchild.
Oh, so that was special.
Yeah, it was very, and of course Alta is holding Doug.
Huh. And that's in front of Aunt Joy's house. I think you
Yes.
said that.
Mm-hmm.
And
We had
then
many picnics there. Joy and David were good hosts and hostesses.
I remember really loving going to their house. It was
Oh.
it was shaded and
Yeah, they had a nice big yard, and you kids could run and play. Joy at one time, Joy and David had I'm thinking it was a Saint Bernard. I'm not sure.
that sounds
Big dog. Well, they liked him. But anyway, I can't remember what his name was, but I think they did that. And then the bottom picture is the Hawkins picnic. We had every May, we had a Hawkins picnic to celebrate everybody's birthday that was in May. And so that particular time, we invited Helen's parents, the Trinkle family that was there. And so it was the Hawkins and Trinkle picture there of all the kids and grandkids that was there. So that's...
And you said that the May picnics, you showed it a long time ago. There was a May picnic with all of the Hawkins boys in front of Jim's house, Uncle Jim's house. And so was was May a particular month?
Yes, that was the month that they had so many birthdays. And so and in Ontario, May was nice weather.
Right.
It wasn't hot. So that's why then, since there were a lot of birthdays in May, we had a picnic to celebrate everybody's birthday that was in May.
And so, but for everybody else, they just kind of celebrated separately. But every year there was a May birthday
Yes.
party.
As far as I remember and can tell, yes, because, but see, mine was in June, so that was different. But because there's so many, it's hard to have birthday, all that many.
Well, I want to ask one question because you had told a story, going back to Aunt Joy's house and the fact that it didn't have running water. Well, it didn't have a toilet in the house, and you had told a story on Brent.
Oh, when he came to visit
Yes.
us. Well, our first house on the hill on Holcomb Hill, where we lived, we bought that house from a family, and it had, the shower was kind of crunchy, but we cleaned and scrubbed till it was as clean as we could get it. And Dad eventually put a bathtub in, and I think he probably had a shower with it. I don't remember, but there was a tub, and there was a sink already in the bathroom, but he put a new toilet in, and while he was doing that work, I had to bathe you children in a wash tub. There were 2 cement wash tubs together out in the laundry room, and so we had to give you kids baths in that. And then for the bathroom, we had a 5-gallon paint bucket or whatever, those big drums. Eugene had a little duct seat that you little kids put on, and so we used that on the bucket for your bathroom at that time. And the kitchen, they had to tear out the kitchen and the bath at the same time. The kitchen, we had to take the cupboards out of that because we had brought, what was the bugs you had? Cockroaches. It was a sister-in-law of Dorothy Wallace's. Dorothy lived with us there in West Lynn, and her sister-in-law had lived there before with Dorothy, someplace they had lived together. And from South Carolina, they had cockroaches, and I guess someone got in her suitcase and came with her. And then we had, and Dorothy and I kept that kitchen. We cleaned every weekend. We cleaned and worked on getting those things out. Well, they followed us from Chalmaine Lane, where it was, and followed us from there up to our house on the hill, on Holcomb Hill. And that's why Dad, because they got behind and we wanted to fix it up too, but the cockroaches were there and we were trying to get rid of them. So we tore out all the cupboards in the kitchen and in the bathroom, and we had to take part of the kitchen out to make room for the tub, because it was just a shower in there. So we had to take a piece out of the kitchen to make room so we could have a bathtub in there. And where was I going from that?
With Brent.
Oh, and then we got the toilet in, but when Brent and Joy came up to help me when Denise was born, and so Brent had always used this, don't know if he wants that said or not, but anyway, he did not like the indoor bath toilet, and so our neighbors still had I don't think they had an indoor bath either. And so they had an outdoor privy, and Brent was using to use in the outdoor privy, and he did not like an indoor one. So we asked the neighbors, which were very close friends to, if Brent could use that outdoor privy. He was about, I don't remember how old he was at that time, but he was small. He must have been, how old was he, can't remember. Anyway, so that he could go out there if he wanted to, but he didn't like the indoor one. Isn't that strange?
Funny.
Well, anyway,
That's a good story.
those were great times.
Okay.